All right, with example number 1 here, essentially we're using the minor pentatonic scale. I'm going to ascend using the minor shape, and then I'm going to descend using the major. And of course, I'm just going to replicate that, go from the major position into Dorian, then from Dorian to Phrygian, from Phrygian to Mixolydian, Mixolydian to Aeolian, and then of course Aeolian back to the major. And then I'm just going to descend sequentially. So in the one instance, I'm basically listening for the tension and release that's created by playing these two scales together, right? There's a musical lesson there. And in the other one, I'm basically moving through each position to hear what it sounds like when I'm just going down the entirety of the scale. It's a great practice exercise. So, of course, get on it. All right, with example number 2 here, or exercise number 2, if you will, we're going to be working on essentially the same thing, which is musical gravity or tension and release, if you will. So instead of using the pentatonic scales, I'm now basically using major scales, or the modes, right? So I'm going to move from Ionian to Dorian, then Dorian to Phrygian, of course, just moving up the scale diatonically speaking through each position, right? The first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and first degree again. And then I'm just using the scale names that you would normally hear, which is Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and then Locrian, right? So each one of those positions has a corresponding scale that goes with it. So ascending and descending in sort of adjacent pairs, if you will, sort of gives you a much deeper appreciation for this musical gravity stuff and the tension and release principle, because you're like, some of these sound really good together, and other ones don't sound so good when I just end on this note. And that's really what you're training yourself to hear, is hearing landing on that note and sort of trying to reconcile that for yourself. So don't get too obsessed about the technical elements here, like the scale charts, because I'm basically using 3 notes per string, just pared down to use it with the classical method. So if you really want to get into this technique, but instead try to think about the practice value and sort of playing 2 of these things together and hearing how they play off each other. And then, of course, you can use intervals later on to get an even more sort of extreme effect. Nice. Let's get into it. All right, with exercise number 2 here, essentially we're going to use 3 notes per string, again, G major, and we're going to ascend using alternate picking and then descend using economy picking. And really it's the mixing and matching of those 2 techniques. And you might be noticing I'm not necessarily being too concerned whether there's a metronome going on or whatever else. Instead, try to, for yourself, hear, you know, where you're a little bit maybe jagged. You can hear it in my own playing where it's really difficult to find that groove to play those scales so that they sound smooth together. And that's a really important skill to exercise. So you'll see me sort of flash up the scale charts and stuff and move from one to the next, again, musical gravity kind of situation. But ultimately, the big takeaway here is mixing and matching the techniques so you can use them whenever you need to. Right, let's get into it. All right, in the next exercise here, we're doing the harmonic minor again, all in relation to G major, of course. So this is basically E harmonic minor. Remember, the harmonic minor scale is built off the 6th degree of a major scale, the natural minor, and same thing with the melodic minor too. So those are just two variations of the natural minor scale. That's an important piece of information most people kind of skip over, but in this case, I'm starting in the Locrian position relative, and then I'm just descending Locrian into the Ionian position, and then, of course, moving up from there, and you'll see the scale charts flash up and all the rest of that good stuff. So just follow along with me and then memorize that pattern, of course. And then notice I'm trying to be musical about playing these scales and stuff. I'm not worried too much about a metronome or anything else, or even just playing them sequentially, one note right after another. If I have to sort of slow down and give myself a moment, really sort of let yourself marinate in these scale sounds so that it becomes second nature because of the sound rather than you trying to memorize a pattern. So here we go, harmonic minor. It wouldn't be a party if we weren't including the melodic minor, so we're going to run through each position again using the vertical methodology. So memorize the sequence, obviously. Try to concentrate on the sound to a certain degree and its otherworldly character. It has no real tonal center, so that's why I call it a slippery scale. And never lose sight of the fact that you need to resolve to something in the diatonic key, or use a pentatonic scale, if you will, to sort of resolve the feistiness of this scale, right? So practicing that later on, ascending using the melodic minor, but then descending using something that relieves its tension, or then working in phrases, if you will, is going to be absolutely essential to really getting the best out of this scale system. So no more yip yapping. Let's get into this bad boy. All right, with this last exercise, it's a bit of a last minute addition. It's essentially the G whole tone scale resolving to the half whole tone scale, a whole step up from where it is, ending essentially, right? So this again sort of demonstrates this principle of musical gravity. You got some tension release going on here. The whole tone scale is very feisty. It's another step up, I guess, obviously from the melodic minor. But again, you can use other scales, and I just use two symmetrical scales in this case, the whole tone scale and the half whole tone scale, the diminished scale, if you will, to sort of do that resolution, if you will, or the resolving of the tension. So this is also an important sound, and it just helps you sort of break out of the monotony of always hearing things diatonically, which can be a bit of a drag. So I won't go on and on and on about it. Instead, listen to it, and when you're ready, start factoring some of these bad boys in there. Nice, you made it to the end. So obviously you can see it's a little bit more than just the nuts and bolts of alternate picking and economy picking, hammer-ons and pull-offs and stuff. You have to have some sort of musical input when you're practicing scales, right? So moving from one position to the next position is going to give you that experience you need to basically hear the tension and release so that you can now string them together in the proper order. Instead of going 1 to 2, you might be like 1 to 3, and then you're like, okay, 1, 3, that's a major third, and if I throw the 5 on there, that gives me 1, 3, 5, a major triad, and then all of a sudden you start stringing the scales together like that. Now all of a sudden you've made a big jump with respect to music theory and real world sort of implementation on the instrument when you need it and you want it. Big difference there, and it's going to create, again, that tension that's absolutely essential to making your playing interesting and keeping it interesting for you so you don't get bored, right? So start factoring that in there. Memorize these positions and the sequence of scale charts, and essentially watch the video as many times as necessary to really start to dig into that stuff. And the last little bit, of course, that we didn't talk about that much in this video because I just wanted to cover the basics, which is going to be essentially going from the harmonic minor or the melodic minor and resolving back into the diatonic key. We're going to look at that in the next video. It'll be a good time, sort of. It'll be a good time for me. I hope it's a good time for you too. So if you have any questions, obviously drop them in the comments. And we'll see you in the next one.